All right. Welcome, everyone. This is our 8th meeting. Wow. Yes. And we got a bunch of, actually, many questions to discuss. And the topics will be one bunch of questions will be on philosophy of intelligence and related questions. The second bunch of questions on psychology of consciousness. And again, we'll probably be discussing something we already discussed before, but maybe with new ideas and understanding of other stuff, we maybe have a better chance understanding what's going on there. And the third type of questions is completely new. We're going to talk about cosmology, and I'll leave it till the later for dessert. And that's, of course, going to be my personal most interesting subject. I'm a cosmologist by training, but I'll try to convince you that the questions that we ask in cosmology may actually be relevant and shed light to other questions we're studying. So that's the plan. And as usual, I'll start with first reading the questions, giving you some insight that I think comes from the theory of learning, and then we'll see what other people thoughts that other people have and ideas, and we'll go from there. Okay, so if you're ready, let's start with philosophy. And the first question is very broad, yet I think it is important to define certain terms. So the first question is, what is knowledge, intelligence, and creativity? So those are three concepts that seem to be related to one another, and yet for us to make progress and proceed, it would be nice to understand what those words mean in the context of the neural network theory, if anything, right? And once we are able to identify that, we may be able to make progress and see, and ask questions, for example, how you can improve knowledge or creativity or intelligence. So let me propose and answer that question, and then we'll go with the discussion. So usually knowledge I relate with information. So information that you obtain. And in the case of the neural network theory, it is what the observer or subnetwork obtains about the rest, about the environment. So this is information, this is the knowledge. We discussed previously that you cannot possibly gain all information about the rest of the universe. So you have to put filters, you have to decide what is relevant to you and what is irrelevant to you. But even that, even if you put the filters and constraints, still there is only so much information that you can get and store locally, right? So that's my understanding of what knowledge is. Now there are different channels of obtaining knowledge. It can be direct evidence. I can just look and see that the sky is blue, or indirect. I can read books of people who had conducted experiments with certain things about certain phenomena that are present in nature, and that would be how I gain knowledge. And basically, I can try to store as much knowledge as I can in myself or in any observer, but there are limitations, right? And then you say, well, can you do better? What can you do to improve the kind of storage capacity? Well, one of the ideas is you can compress it, right? You can find correlations between this type of data and this type of data. And the ability to do this compression, to find patterns, relate unrelated fields. This is what I would relate with intelligence. Again, I mean, this is just a hypothesis, conjecture. Well, let's, what if this is what intelligence, ability to find correlations and relate their unrelated pieces of information. And then the third one, the creativity, seems to be something outside of this framework. Creativity is like you're creating new information about the environment that you haven't obtained from anywhere. But how do you get it? Do you just cook it up in your head? Or that's one possibility. So it's kind of you're inventing it, right? Or you just open up your filters and start receiving information that wasn't possible to receive before. You open new channels of communication. So we've been kind of discussing a little bit about what if there are channels of communication that isn't just light or sound and like maybe psychological. Maybe I don't know that, but there's two possibilities for how new ideas can be created. It's either you remove the filters and then you gain that information, and that kind of makes sense from the point of view of neural network theory, or you cook up it yourself inside of you, and then that doesn't really make sense in the context of the neural network theory. So discovering information makes sense. Inventing doesn't quite make sense, and so or at least I don't know how make sense out of it. So those are the three things: knowledge, intelligence, and creativity. And so some of you have anything to add, because I gotta confess that those are difficult topics to discuss. But anyways, what are your thoughts?
What about evolutionary model, when we just have some stochastic generation in our head and some discriminator, internal or external, under which of these divisions, or what division it falls in your model?
Right, but this stochasticity is kind of forgetting information. Now, it does sometimes lead for you to discovering new patterns, but patterns about something that is outside of you, of the environment, of the universe. So this information was already there. Okay, you were not able to make sense of it before. You've underwent learning, and then eventually said, here it is. Now I understand why sky is blue, or why is this and that. So information was already there. You didn't create it. But you were not the first to create it for sure, right? But you've been able to interpret it and store it locally. And you could have done it inefficiently, just I free up some memory and store information there, or efficiently, intelligently, I relate it to something that I already known before, and then the storage is more accurate. Like I always give example of intelligent versus non-intelligent is when you learn physics. Let's say you can do it as pure sequence of information. You learn one branch of physics, then you learn another, then you learn the third, and those are like all disconnected pieces of information. Or you can start with one principle, least action principle, and then derive every single branch of physics from it. And so that second approach is intelligent. You've identified the relations between the different branches. And the first is not intelligent, but it still gives you some knowledge of how different branches work. And so that I kind of understand. Creativity is, I think, is something else. And if it's truly creativity, like truly created by you, now it may be scientific piece of knowledge, it can be maybe artistic style, it doesn't really matter at this point, but creating it within yourself, without the environment influencing it, is something I don't quite understand how can be explained with the neural network, unless there are some hidden connections or non-local connections of your intelligence to, we discussed this, universal consciousness. If you have that connections to universal consciousness, which you may not be able to describe with the local 3+1 dimensional theories, yet you can describe it within context of neural network theory, then again, you are not gaining that knowledge within yourself, within the observer, but by just removing the filters, but just saying, okay, now I want to investigate and study information flow through a new channel, right? And that's both things are miracles, right? All of a sudden you gain some new insight, new idea, new framework in physics, I don't know, new formula in mathematics. You just haven't derived it, you just cook it up and then you check it independently. So it does sound like a miracle, but how that creativity process happens is, if it is discovery, I kind of understand. If it is just internal inventions, I still don't get it. Okay, so there, Bobby, go ahead, and then Katya.
Yeah, so I think there's a third possibility that Maybe similar to the invention one, and I'm not saying that there aren't the hidden connections as well. I think that could be possible too, and that's really interesting and something to discuss as well. First, I'll tell you how I define knowledge, which is pretty similar to yours, but maybe a little bit more specific. So I've been defining it as the information that reduces our uncertainty about the world, basically like reducing like Shannon entropy. And this knowledge is encoded in a model, a generative or a predictive model in the organism. And basically that model gets updated through a variation in selection Darwinian mechanism, which is a form of trial and error learning, or generate and test. So this comes from like Karl Popper's evolutionary epistemology, pretty much, but I pretty much try to update it with like a kind of statistical thermodynamics perspective. And then I learned about Carl Friston's work, like the free energy principle, which already was doing that. So then intelligence would be basically, for example, when an organism has a mutation, which is a variation on their design, you could imagine like a bacterium performing chemotaxis. So chemotaxis, basically a bacteria knows how to swim towards chemical food and away from toxins in the environment. Basically, when it doesn't sense food, it'll move its flagella until it senses a chemical gradient, and then it will stop and feed. So it's a simple binary mechanism. But you could imagine that there's a mutation when it reproduces, it has offspring, and you could imagine it moving randomly, but it has a mutation where it moves in the direction of the food, like of a food signal. So now it has a mutation where it's basically encoded like another variable in the world, and it's accumulation of these little variations, the ones that are selective and benefit fitness, that stick around in the environment. So that's how knowledge accumulates, and knowledge would be statistical correlation between the system and its environment. And so that reduction of uncertainty also is equivalent to more statistical information or mutual information between system and environment. And just the last point about creativity. So what creativity would be is you have a model, and then you're using your generative model. For humans, you're actually using consciousness to do a transformation on the patterns that are already stored. So it's not a pure invention. It's just that the system is taking patterns that it's encoded from the environment, and it's imagining transformations, and those are like counterfactuals. And then so you could imagine a future where you invent some new piece of technology, and then you can bring it into existence. And so you're inventing that, but when you invent a plane, you have a design from a bird because you've seen a bird. And so I think every invention can be traced back to some previous pattern. So it's really, learning is just the variation and selection mechanism, and you're always varying your model. And that's pretty much what creativity is. It's just hard to see when it's a big jump in the configuration space. Like if you use your consciousness to think of this design, that's this pretty drastic transformation from the designs that already exist. It can look pretty radically new, but it's still just a variation on that old design. Though I do think there could be some sort of mechanism of entangled brains or something that evolution exploited, the power of quantum entanglement to do computation. I'm not ruling that out, but I mean, that's kind of fringe and speculative, but fun to think about.
Sure. I think I completely agree with you in terms of knowledge. And I think pretty much that's what I said. I just didn't want to go into the more technical stuff, but you're completely correct. The learning is the process of removing entropy from your predictions of the environment, making better model of it. I didn't quite understand what your proposal for intelligence was. However, I do think that what you said about creativity is what I call intelligence. So ability of seeing a bird that flies and then say, well, here it is, maybe we can make a plane that will fly using similar phenomena. So I just found a correlation between using an organic material that flies and building a physical material that flies by using similar phenomena. So I would still configure it to intelligence. When I do talk about creativity, I think, again, we can decide what we call creativity, what we call intelligence, but I always think about something that is not there. So it's like in terms of generative models, you haven't put it in, and yet your system came up with it. Like you didn't put, let's say, calculus, and then machine or a human created this new machinery, new framework, mathematical framework, new formula to use it. Now, then the question is, was it the internal thought process that just led you there because you continued compressing information, and then eventually you figured out, well, this is just a more useful way of doing it? And if that's so, then you are really just discovering it, right? So you've seen then you're inventing it. You're really compressing information. Something inside led you into invention, a certain mechanism. And discovery is more like it was already there. You just observed it, and once you observed it, you put it in the right framework to model. So still would want to get your feedback on the intelligence, because I do think I'm missing something. How you define?
Yeah, it's kind of abstract, but just to talk about that last point. So, because I see them as kind of the same thing. So you're trying to map reality, and there's certain dynamics of reality that sort of exists, sort of in a platonic sense, but it's really out there. And then you're trying to solve those problems because ultimately you're trying to survive. And so you're trying to model the world and understand its dynamics. And you're taking patterns that you're already aware of because you've encoded those dynamics, whether it's through conscious learning or whether it's built up through evolutionary history. So in this model, knowledge would be genetic knowledge, neural knowledge, cultural knowledge, all of those things. So the genome would be a knowledge repository as well. And then so the invention is you taking patterns and basically kind of rearranging them. Almost the same way a neuroscientist, Eric Hole, has a theory of dreams, is basically dreams being like the brain's running through different predictive possibilities, like counterfactuals, and that they help you sort of prepare for the unexpected in life. So, but mathematics is kind of interesting because, yeah, when you said that, I was like, well, when you do come up with a new, field of mathematics, it is pretty radically new. Yeah. But I still think that you're taking algorithms and mixing those, and based on what you've known in the past, you're doing some sort of almost like a statistical thing, or like a Frankenstein type thing. And so you would be inventing it, but you're only inventing it because you're trying to solve some sort of problem. You're trying to understand the dynamics of the world, which are already out there. So whether I call that discovery or invention, it kind of, I don't know. It kind of seems to be both. Exactly.
That's where I'm struggling, right? So let me just add one more thing, and maybe it will satisfy both of us, and then I'll give word to Katya so that she can chip in. So it looks like we're agreeing that obtaining knowledge is some kind of gradual process of creating an internal model of the environment that helps you learn the universe, right? Now, maybe creativity is a phase transition in that learning. So when you are not slowly reducing the knowledge by creating, adjusting your trainable parameters better and better, but you have a sudden change, in the paradigm. You all of a sudden suddenly realize that the space shouldn't be flat; it should be curved, like Einstein realized. Or it shouldn't be described by the classical mechanics, should describe the quantum mechanics. Or even as we grow, right? We always have the sudden realizations when you learn some material, you don't quite understand it, and then all of a sudden there's this aha moment. Then you say, "Aha! Now I understand it." Okay, so that sudden change is your own creativity. But again, the question is whether it's your own invention of that, or you just discovered that was already out there. Yeah, but I think we would agree that this is kind of a discontinuous, sudden phase transition change.
Yeah, and there's actually global workspace theory talks about phase transitions in the brain when there's a new conscious percept, and there's actually what's called an ignition event. Yeah. And it's literally like a phase transition.
Well, it's even more than that. The brain is constantly in a critical state of phase transition. So we have this micro discoveries all the time, but they're just some of them are more important. Katya, I'm so sorry. Now it's all you. Go ahead.
No problem. A couple of points. First, about intelligence, I'd like to suggest the definition that Michael Levin gives. It's not contradictory, but just a bit another angle. He defines, he and with some co-authors, they define intelligence as the ability to handle stress in some or solve in some problem space, or it's the ability of problem solving in some problem space. So the ability to identify stress and eliminate is so like solving.
Well, but the problem solving, I think it is still the skill of reusing, recycling information, right? You've seen such and such situation, and one circumstances, you've remembered it. Now you've discovered that this present situation relates somehow to the previous one, and you connected the dots, basically, right? So if that is, their proposal, then it agrees with what I say.
I think it's not contradictory, because anything is processing information. We can
but how? See, the problem is how. You can just record information like a movie, right? And that will be very ineffective. Well, maybe it's good for certain purposes, and you can rewind and see in details what happened before, or you can coarse grain it in a clever way, such that you pay attention to redundancies, right? When the similar phenomena is present, you don't have to remember the taste of all apples. You can just remember that all of them kind of taste more or less the same, and you don't have to just remember how different theories work if they all follow from the least action principle. So that's what, like, identifying the patterns, and the better you can identify, the better you can compress information, and then the more information you can store. And then if you can store more information, then you're just a better survive. You have a much better skills in surviving. Now this doesn't still, you can be a very good survivor and very effective learner without being creative. You still do not need creativity for doing all that. It's like, imagine like you can read all the books, you can memorize all of them, you can know all the theories, but still being unable to do research, right? Create new ideas. You would still be fine, but then one piece would still be missing, the creativity.
Well, actually, this definition is applied to, it is scaleless. It is applied not only to humans, to cells, to every organism that is solving different levels of tasks. So
you bet, yeah. So we already agreed. So this multi-levelness should apply to all levels.
Yeah. And another factor that they consider is the let's say volume of problem space. It is called light cone. Mm-hmm. So the more is this light cone, both in space and time, the higher intelligence is. I mean, the light cone of your care. They also use the concept of care as the ability to solve, not the ability, also the motivation to solve stress.
Right, but I think what I'm trying to be more mathematical, right? At the level of neural network, what would it mean? It would be a clever architecture, right? Where you can actually highly connected. It's not like this is part of the brain uses to process images. This part of the brain uses to process sound. This part of it, it's all interconnected so that you can compress information better. So it still is about ability to kind of compress information. Like knowledge is just information, intelligence is ability to compress information, and the creativity is to create information, if you wish. That wasn't there. Or discover, right? It's either create this new information by discovering. So, for example, we've in the 19th centuries we haven't done any high energy experiments, so we didn't know about the quarks and fundamental particles, but it was always there. But then we hooked up experiments, we discovered it, right? So that was a discovery. This was a new creation of new. Was creativity to find those, but by observing, or there is some clever person named Dirac who sit down and wrote his equation out of blue, right? So he just, started reasoning and then created this new approach to fermionic field theories, and it's not clear whether when you show signs of creativity, whether you are just matching the environment, right, learning from the environment, or you are creating something internally. I think we would not resolve this question, but I think that.
Vitaly, let me just quickly. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bobby. Sorry.
I just want to quickly. You asked me about the intelligence thing, and I just wanted to explain that quickly because I think I also think it bridges what Katya was saying. And I just saw Michael Levin did an interview with this channel called The Truth with Carlos Farias, and it has on the cover, it says, had the cognitive light cone picture, and the video went viral. I just did his podcast last week, and Michael Levin was on the week before me. So yeah, I really want to watch that video. I think it's important. So maybe we can discuss that next time. But he also has a paper with Daniel Dennett for Eon. That's an essay on intelligence that gets at this. But basically with evolutionary epistemology, Popper said that all science and evolution, even evolutionary learning, is problem solving. So when we try to solve a problem, it's basically us trying to survive or trying to stay far from thermodynamic equilibrium. And so the definition I gave came from David Wolpert from Santa Fe Institute. And David Wolpert basically has come up with this concept of semantic information. So it's not just Shannon syntactic information, it's meaningful information. And he defines that as information that's helping the organism stay far from equilibrium or stay in existence. So if you knock out a gene, and for example, that gene is a gene that corresponds to a frog detecting a fly when it's in the environment, then that frog won't be able to survive because it won't be able to eat. So that gene, compared to a gene that has no effect on behavior, encodes semantic information. It's information about survival. So what I was trying to say before is that when there's this reproduction that we have of biology and you have variation through genetic mutation, you're exploring the state space of possible genomes. And so you're exploring variations in the genome. So it's variation in your predictive model. And those ones that are predictive of the environment get to stick around and they make more copies and you get more variations. And so the idea is this happens at every level. Like you said, it's scale and variance. So with brains, when we're learning as kids, we're also doing trial and error. We're varying our behavior. We might reach for our bottle. We might miss it and knock it over. We don't get a reward signal. We don't get a dopamine signal. So we try something different. And the baby doesn't know what's going to get it to the bottle. So it might go in the wrong direction, but then it'll correct when it doesn't get a successful trial. And so basically all of learning would be building up variables of the world in your model through trial and error or variation selection at the genetic level. And this is building up statistical correlation with the environment, because now when you have that variable in your model, you're aware of it. Like you have that in your mind. You can close your mind when you have a dream of your room, those objects will be in your room. So you're becoming more correlated and more synchronized with your environment. And what I've tried to argue, and what was so exciting about finding your work, is that it seems like life in the biosphere is sort of like an intelligent AI system being trained, and the data is the external sensory data from the world. And the living network is just expanding because it's continually modeling the world as if it is running on like a machine learning algorithm.
Yeah, well, I don't think I disagree with any of this. Actually, I do agree with any of this. The point is that we all kind of look at the hypothesis that the universe is a learning system, and that's how any part of the universe learns the rest, right? Whether this part is as a single person, as a molecule, is a whole biosphere, the same phenomena happens. But the question we are asking now is, within this learning system, how do we define knowledge and intelligence? So if I give you two systems, how do you tell me which one is more intelligent? How do you tell me which one has more knowledge? So now we are trying to have
And so one would encode
yeah, go ahead.
One would have a model with more states of the world. So a bacterium would have just a few states, and a human would have, who knows, millions, billions.
Well, let's take two humans.
Okay.
And then each of them has exactly the same number of trainable parameters. So let's just use the right words, right? Trainable parameters within their ability of the human to model the universe, or bacteria, it doesn't matter. So the number of parameters is the most information you can store. So the more parameters, the more information you can store. But you can store it efficiently or inefficiently, right? Because you never store different states of the universe. You store different coarse-grained states of the universe. You always have to filter irrelevant information and concentrate on the relevant. And then again, I give you two networks, two humans, and say, okay, here we go. Tell me which one is more intelligent. Yes, this one is learning. Yes, this one is learning. Yes, this one has some number of trainable parameters, and this one has number of trainable parameters. How do you compare which one is more intelligent? How do you decide?
So I've argued that 5 from integrated information theory can measure the number of accessible cognitive states. And yes, they're coarse-grained states of the world.
Right. So, okay, so let me give you one has 100 states, but very coarse-grained, and the other one has 10, but very fine-grained. Which one is the winner? See? So it's not.
So every state is an equivalent. Okay.
So it's not as simple as just saying the number, because it's always, we are never recording a finite, fine-grained pictures of the reality, because this is very inefficient. Okay, we don't do that. What we actually do, we first put a filter, coarse-grained information, and then after that filter passed, even the remaining information, we don't record it completely. We just decide, here's what I'm going to keep, here's what I'm going to keep, not keep, right? And delete. Donald, you're raising your hand, so I'm sure you have something important to say. Go ahead.
Yes, from the knowledge standpoint, kind of what you're getting at, I would say it's the efficiency of the use of the knowledge.
Exactly.
It's purely a straight efficiency quotient, because I know tons of people. A friend of mine works in a hospital, and she was discussing, one of her coworkers says the woman does a great job, but she knows what she's memorized. Right. But whenever something new comes along, she can't handle it. If a new situation that she hasn't seen before comes along, she breaks down.
Yeah.
Whereas my roommate is the opposite way. Whenever stuff gets crazy, she's immediately able to compensate on what she knows before, what she's learned in school and stuff on new situations, to apply some of that background knowledge that she has. So I would say it's an efficiency of recall and use of known states to be able to get to.
So that brings us back to what we discussed long ago, like what is consciousness? Efficiency of learning. The more efficient learning you are, the more conscious you are. So really intelligence is related to consciousness. But now let me give you, since Donald, you said something important, let me just give you an example of my students. There are always two types of students. So one student who comes and says, I'll just memorize everything and I'll do fine on the final. And so this student spends enormous amount of time memorizing all the formulas, all possible homework problems I gave, and still gets at most B on the final. And then there is another person who sits there, never does any homeworks, skips all the classes, comes once in a while, asks the right question, and then goes back doing to whatever he's good in doing, I don't know, surfing, and then comes and get an A+ on the final. Okay, why? Because he just grasped the main concepts, the very small number of bits, like principles, from which he can deduce everything else. Yes, it will take him some time to rederive, the theorems that I try to ask him to use in the final exam. But he's a very efficient learner in terms of he compressed information to the bare minimum. He filtered out all the irrelevant stuff, and that is a high level of intelligence. And you can really see a phase transition from a student who is just memorizing to a student who is actually intelligently using the knowledge. There is really a sharp, I tell the students all the time, like, learn how to learn. And when they learn it, for them, after that, physics becomes a piece of cake. Before that, it's the most complex subject of all. Katya, you're raising your hand, or you forgot to put it?
I wanted to also about when you were talking about creativity, you mentioned something about internal versus external information, but there is some tricky point. I don't know if I can explain, but I try. It is question, what is internal and what is external for the observer. If we when we are talking about something internal, usually in the usual ordinary sense, we mean our psychological, emotional stuff. But for the observer, this is also external for the observer. This is something we study or trying to learn.
You can create an internal model of yourself, and that is completely okay. You can also create internal model. We discussed, like, as the kids grow, they first model, the environment, then they think they model it well enough, and so they start modeling themselves. And that's how development works. But I think the question whether what's external, what's internal, you just put boundary any way you want, and you can still ask a question. For that boundary, for that observer, what is knowledge? Okay, what is the intelligence, and what is the creativity? Any way you want. Right? What is our overall creativity of the biosphere? Yeah, you can ask that question. You put the boundary and you ask that question.
Yeah, I'm trying to say that there is no internal and external.
No, it's a hypothetical boundary you put to ask question, right? So, if in the neural network picture, everything is connected. So if you're asking a question, you specify a boundary and say, for this boundary, here is my answer.
You're talking about from where we can get some new knowledge when talking about creativity, right? So in this context, I'm not sure there is internal and external.
No, internal for you. So you learned something, right? So you learned something. How did you learn something new? Some new idea. You learned it. Somebody communicated it to you. You learned it because you open up channels and yourself learned it. Okay. Or you learned it because something internally happened without any interactions with the environment. So I don't think this last one makes sense in terms of the neural network theory. It's always, you're always interacting with the environment, and you learn from the interactions. So that's kind of why.
I think there are. Yes, you're always interacting, but it's. This interaction is not necessarily some interhuman communication that you talk to someone.
No, not at all. It can be like you directly do an experiment without anyone involved, or maybe some other unknown channels to our communication that people may.
Yeah, if it is unknown, for example, if you discovered something in a dream,
right?
It is, we can call it a channel of communication, right?
Exactly, but maybe it is. The point is, maybe it is a channel of communication. Maybe it
I think it is.
Right, yeah. And so, okay, very good. So I think we are on the. Let's move on because we're.
Sorry, one more point. One more point about the creativity. You're saying that it is some way of getting a knowledge. Right.
But it's phase transition. It's a discontinuous way. Yeah. It's not like improving a continuous parameters to better and better describe environment. It's like
Yeah.
a sudden
Yeah.
paradigm shift,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like it was a quantum physics, and now I say it's neural physics. It's a discontinuous change, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to link it to art field. And in this field, when we talk about creativity, it is something strange can be created, that it is not a knowledge that we know how to use. Maybe it's something that we can feel, or so how can we apply this?
Well, it doesn't matter if we can use it or not. It's something new, right? I mean, new pattern, right? Or new style. It's something new, whether you can use. There's a lot of mathematics that was created and we're still not using it. It doesn't mean it's not important. It is new, it's somebody created it. We should pay attention to it. We should learn that it exists. Okay, and the same with art. We may not have an immediate use to it, but with arts, I think we'll discuss it, but it may open up channels of communication. You like one art and I like some art. And because of that, we come together and write down the theory of quantum gravity. And who started it? The art, okay? And so it's useful, yes, it will be useful. Victor, go ahead.
I have another opinion about art. I think that art is just a byproduct of this process which we just now described. The ability to see and create useful patterns, useful in the sense that it helps us to survive. And this ability gives byproducts. You start seeing patterns in the sky or on paper, and so you create it. Probably it has later some use in as expanding channels of communication, creating language.
Absolutely.
But the origin of art is just a byproduct of this general ability to see patterns, which are very helpful in understanding the nature, and probably again, art probably is a way to understand the nature of some social systems, but it's not a primary function. But then if we have discussing art and other types of inventions, then we probably have to distinguish between, let's say, formal understanding, formal models, and intuitive models. And then we see that there's no real way to compare intelligence of two people with the same brain. One can be very effective in intuitive understanding of a systems, be it physical, social, and the other person can be very good at formal understanding of formal systems, creating languages, and achieving the same results, the same effectiveness in his results in a completely different way. So they probably can effectively store information in the same way, but their models and are of very different nature. Intuitive model, neural connectivist model is very different from a formal model, but they're supported by the same wetware in our brains. But these two types of models function very differently, like Kahneman system 1 and system 2. It's all about, and so it's impossible to compare these systems. And probably they are this whole spectrum. They are not separate. And in formal intuitive models, they evolve and into some formalism, more or less strict formalism, and at least at some mathematical level of formal models. But it's important to distinguish between these types of knowledge. And,
perfect. This is actually our next question. You're kind of can we talk about types of knowledge, intelligence, and creativity? And when Victor said that, well, yes, we can, we should, but then what does it mean mathematically? What does mathematically mean that there are different types of knowledge? And then there was another question: are those types accessible to each other? compatible with each other or not. So how do we think? The way I think about this, yes, it's possible that you have all this environment around us that we're trying to model. We put different filters, and so we project it to different subspaces, right? So one pays attention to sounds, the other person pays more attention to looks, the third person pays more attention to mathematics. Those are all different projections of the reality, and each of us can decide to use one type of knowledge, one type of channels with which we assume to model this environment, right? Now, are they compatible with one another? Are they incompatible? Well, I think like if we combine it all together, the overall knowledge or the whatever super knowledge has to have all of it, has to have all of the dimensions. But yet, since we all have finite size, where we have to store model of the universe, we project it. We always put filters.
What really puzzles me is that they are all created by the same brain. So the answer is yes, they are compatible. They cannot be incompatible because they are supported by the same neural network in our heads. But how that can be? It's a great puzzle for me.
No, but you make decisions. No, I think the answer to this is that you always make a decision of putting a filter. You always make a decision what I should pay attention to or what I should not pay attention. Like, you always pay attention to what your wife says, right? Because putting a filter there is not a good idea. But other things you are free to put your filter on, right? And once you made this decision,
attention is what you need. We know now it's pretty well. Attention is
of course, absolutely. But then deciding what is relevant and what is irrelevant is your choice. Once you made this choice, yes, you're absolutely right, Victor, that it is using the same kind of architecture, the hardware we're using, so they're all compatible. But then there is still a question whether there might exist some other incompatible intelligence, and that is not stored in the hardware of human beings, but stored in some other hardware. And we may talk about this later once we get to the consciousness discussion. But Donald, go ahead.
Yeah, some of the filter thing that you're saying, we decide.
There is a problem with the sound. You guys, can you guys hear Donald?
It's all our
Donald,
decision.
Yes, there is problem with connection, compression, overcompressed sound.
Exactly. There are too much. Somebody's putting filters.
Probably you just turn off the video, Donald.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let's try it again.
Yeah. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Some of what you said about filtering, that we decide what we want to pay attention to. I think that some of our intelligence is predetermined biologically, because we have a lot of stuff going on with DNA and genes within our system, because you get people that are just naturally better at certain things from the moment they're born. They have an inherent ability to learn certain things that other people find much harder, such as you have musicians that, you know, they kind of know from before they even know what they know, they're just musical. They tend to pay attention to that a lot more going way back. So is some of that intelligence and the compatibility biologically based, to where if your DNA aligns up a certain way, all those little switches and stuff like that in our cells align up a certain way, it sets certain filters in certain directions so that you're better at certain things than, say, the next person next to you, even a person within your own family who should have a very similar set of genes and similar experience and everything. Hello?
Yeah, Don, great. Yeah, I absolutely agree that we all have slightly different filters. Different organisms have very different filters, right? We only can see in a very finite frequency band and hear in a finite frequency band. The other animals can see in other bands, but that was presumably all determined by the by the desire to better learn the environment and survive in it. understand the environment and survive it. But I think this question was a little bit deeper, although I might be exaggerating. This is the philosophy question. So maybe the question was, is it possible that there is some other, universal intelligence that is not built on the biological organism, that has its own knowledge, its own intelligence, its own creativity, which is incompatible with ours. And then the reason why we cannot understand it is because of our hardware, of our design. Now, I find it hard to believe that there exists, because I think mathematics is universal, and we've discovered mathematics, and we seem to be pushing the boundaries of mathematics so much. So I find it hard to believe that there may exist something incompatible with us, with our intelligence. It may be hard to uncover some results. It took us a while to prove point correct conjecture or Fermat's theorem. Nevertheless, it doesn't seem like there is a sharp cutoff. Beyond this, you won't be able to understand something. So that any
You're
other
talking about another species, or
there's very
intelligence, or the biosphere as an intelligent entity?
Yeah, so there is a lot of discussion about people having been in contact with their other types of intelligences, like in their dreams, in their hallucination experiences, or whatever, right? And then they usually say, well, they're intelligent. Well, their contact was with some super intelligent aliens, whatever you want to call them, right? Something other than our intelligence. And I hear those stories. I haven't had such an experience. And the question that arises is it why is it possible that there is something that is just incompatible with us, and that's why we cannot?
We have seen this discussion in our group, and what we can see that people sometimes claim that these other beings have greater knowledge.
That was my question, right?
But that's different. It's different. Greater knowledge, greater knowledge of just in terms of the data stored, some other laws, other patterns. This is one thing. But basically, if we think that all calculation, mathematics is single, then we cannot imagine other math, which means that if we acquire enough knowledge, we can understand any system which is doing the same calculations based on the same basic principles of calculation.
If math is universal, and that's kind of what was my understanding too. If math is universal, then it doesn't matter how advanced their knowledge is. If we should be able to acquire that as well directly by whatever means of communication we can establish, or indirectly by doing our own homeworks and pushing the science further.
No, as we discussed, the volume of memory can be a problem. Just the length of the Turing machine can be different, and sometimes it can be incompatible. Just because
we're not reaching the limits of our memory. We are using very little of it, right? And then we can play tricks because we can use our combined memory, and we can. So we're not reaching that limit yet.
But theoretically we can meet something which we cannot understand because of these limitations. But
yes,
this is the only barrier I can think of out of.
I agree.
Just to give a name for that, because I was looking for a name and I found one from some cyberneticists. I don't know if you're familiar with Valentin Turchin, but he was a Russian computer scientist, and he wrote a book called The Phenomenon of Science, which was like in the 70s, but it basically had like neural networks and this philosophy of metasystem transitions, that the universe was organizing itself into these higher levels. So it's really similar to, your views. But yeah, it was called the principle of incomplete knowledge. So our model is always going to be incomplete. But we do get closer to modeling reality as it is, the more we accumulate knowledge. I don't think we'll ever get a perfect model, but we can reduce uncertainty. So I do, there's a big debate about whether, we can get closer to truth, whether there is objective truth. And then postmodernists said, no, there's no objective truth. It's all social constructs. But I do think, although we can't reach it, we can, the more we model the world in its causal detail, we get closer to objective truth. But what I was going to say was, so I'm always fascinated by the story of the mathematician, the Indian mathematician, Ramanujan.
Yes.
So he came up with these equations that are now being discovered to it was like string theory has like uncovered some of these equations that he had written in his book like 100 years ago. And the big mystery about him and the reason that, he was from a small town in India, didn't have like, a fancy college education. And so he sent letters to Cambridge or Oxford, one of those. And at first they thought it was a hoax, but he had these, formulas that he'd come up with, but he wasn't finding them in the normal way that mathematicians do. And then he didn't have proof. So people weren't even sure if they were legitimate at first. And they asked him, where does he get that knowledge from? And he was completely serious. And he said, his God, it was some variation of Shiva, I think maybe like Nama something, I forget the name with the N, but that the God was delivering him that mathematical information. And then I had a friend who's an Indian computer scientist who has a similar story, but he told me that when he was in India, he heard a voice in his head that he later, thought was his God. I forget which God it was. And it told him to come here. And he came here, he got a full ride scholarship, and he just published a book called The Recursive Universe. So I've heard similar stories of that. And as I've been, studying more computational neuroscience and Friston's work and thinking about internal models, what I came to the conclusion of, and I found out there was like a big field of research in this area, is that, okay, so we have to model the world. We're social agents. The thing that's most relevant to our survival are other biological agents and other humans in modern society. So we have to construct models of those people. And in our dreams, we see those models come to life. And we can close our eyes and imagine our best friend. We can imagine their sense of humor. We can imagine all these characteristics about them. So it's as if our brain at the subconscious level has all of these agents, that it's this collection of agents that we've modeled. And I think that's part of intelligence. In clinical psychology, there's this internal family systems theory that sees you as this sort of collection of all the people you know. In Friston's work, there's this new framework called Thinking Through Other Minds, which says that social cohesion is created by having theories of minds of others and thinking about like what they would do in this situation. So I think a lot of these experiences where people are thinking that they're communicating with other agents is that they've created an internal model of that agent, and that agent has taken on a life of its own. And I have a friend who has graduated from UVA, top of his class in physics, got NYU computer science, master's in philosophy, like double major 4.0, developed schizophrenia. And he was thinking that he had an AI that was attacking him, and the AI was in his head. And it made me again just think that he has created some internal model of an AI in his head, and he feels like it's attacking him in his mind. There is a reality to that agent. If you could see on an fMRI, you could probably like see, the activity corresponding to that, agent that he's mentally constructed. So maybe that's it. Whether there could be non-local connections between other agents and whether there's some sort of quantum entanglement between cognitive systems, I think that's fascinating too. But maybe it could be explained by just having modeled other agents and that they exist on this subconscious level.
Yeah,
I think that's really good, Bobby.
There's only one problem with this. So if you create a model of agent inside your head, why that model would be smarter than you are? And yet the formulas that the Indian genius was producing were not present at his level. and nobody else knew about it. So there
Yeah.
was
So
some
what
kind
do you
of
think
new
of this?
knowledge outside of it that he obtained.
I had a dream and it was Bjork and it was a concert, but the dream in the song was a Bjork song. And I'm a musician, so maybe this explains this, but I'm not nearly as, I'm not good enough to create this song. It was a brand new Bjork song that I never heard. And I woke up in the middle of the dream enough to have the melody still in my mind. And it was a fully orchestrated original song. And I have no idea how my brain created that. And if I had access to that, I could be musician, a much better
you don't
musician
think
than
your
I am.
brain could created it, and
In
if it
this
was not your
model-
brain, that was something outside of your brain.
No,
And if
no,
it
no.
was
But
something outside of the brain, that whether it's a formula or a music or whatever it is, then there has to be some other connections that we are just
no.
filtering.
Vitaly, in this model where the brain can generate, contain, and model other agents, in this model there is no you. You is just one
No,
of
I
these
understand. System,
agents.
right? No,
So-
no.
so
When I
we
say
see-
you, I say the system, the subsystem of the universe.
But this is just one subsystem which is running some external communication channels, and we see all these now very well modeled in large language models, which can be prompted into acting as different personalities. And on the same neural network, you can model very different persons, very different agents, proficient in very different areas. You can model a musician, computer programmer,
But you stored more
scientist.
information. No, that I disagree. You put in more information than you get out. That's okay, because you put in the entire World Wide Web in there and all of the books of Shakespeare, and then you get out.
No, but after that you just put in a rather short prompt.
No, it doesn't
And-
matter. The program has all it in the weights. All this information is written in the weights.
Okay,
Now
but
let's say
what?
now let's ask generate a formula that was not written there, and it doesn't produce a new formula. It only produces old formula, so it doesn't create new information.
No,
And yet, this experience with the Indian genius was, whose last name I cannot pronounce, was that exactly he generated a new formula, actually collection, many formulas. So this channel was quite open for him to obtain all those formulas. That people at that time, with all of the humanity, with the math skills they had at that time, were not able to prove whether this formula is correct or incorrect. And until later, when they actually were able to prove. So this information he had access to, and nobody else had.
He just had seen some pattern. The pattern was pre-existing, just like the mathematics. The pattern itself was pre-existing. He just discovered it. It's one explanation. And for the creativity, there is another explanation, which I already mentioned, is some stochastic process with discriminators. And again, large language models, they have some random seeds in them. So they can be tuned to generate some stochastic information, and then they themselves can launch some model, some critic inside critics agent, which is responsible for the critics and which acts as a discriminator. And now it cannot filter very effectively, but we are much bigger networks, so we can filter very effectively. And this stochastic generation of ideas with discrimination can explain a big part of what we call creativity.
If those ideas are new, if their ideas is just were already there, and your AI just restates it, then that's not.
No. If there is some random seed,
I haven't seen any new ideas generated by AI, but maybe I haven't been putting the right prompts. Alexander, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. How is it different from some European genius that also generated some formulas, right? And maybe couldn't prove them, but felt intuitively that they are right? Maybe it's just a matter of perception of this Indian guy that he.
No, absolutely. So some people.
External agent.
Yeah, but that's the challenge where I'm not able to understand, right? So this is. It seems like people are claiming those contacts. Most of the people who claim that those contacts with superintelligence cannot provide evidence for the contacts, like what is the information that you received that nobody else knows? Just tell me what it is. So they're not able to provide this information. But some can, and if they can, then this is a challenge, because we need to explain how this information was. Because
why is it super intelligence? Maybe it's sitting inside the brain to generate it. Just they perceive it as it's received from external agents, right? But maybe it's generated within their brains.
So if it is generated within their brains, I don't see how that's possible, because it's like kind of generating new mathematics within the head. He dreamed out those formulas. So maybe there is some higher level emergent phenomena that I quite not understanding yet. Could be, but from what it sounds like, is there some new channel that we haven't been.
That's a natural thing. You slip over some matter, right? Some subject, and you have a solution next day, let's say, because your brain produced something at
that
night,
happened
right?
with me many times.
Yeah,
you like hook up a problem, you go to bed. In
so
the morning,
where does it come from? Where does it come from?
But again, the problem where the creativity comes from is the problem. Yes, it's a huge problem. But I can understand creativity, one thought per year, one creative idea per year, or like per month. But this guy was producing them, I don't know, constantly. It was just he couldn't even, as my understanding was, he couldn't even understand the methods of how to prove those formulas. Right? Some of them didn't exist. Even those methods that already existed, he didn't know about, or he couldn't really publish their work. It was just dreamed up a formula. That's it. Donald, I don't know if you're raising your hand or you forgot to put it down.
Yes, no, I did forget to put it down, but I re-raised it. Talking about all this, and especially with this Indian gentleman, I have personal experience with having had dreams where I've met people, and then 10 years later, I actually do meet that person that I had no way of knowing, that was not anywhere near where that person was. They weren't famous, so they were not up. I've had my ex-wife. There was a span of time when we were apart, and she was having a significant emotional event going on a weekly basis. She would have a certain thing happen to her. And every time that happened, it was always at night, I would wake up. And at first I thought it was just me waking up, but I don't usually wake up at night. And then I talked to her once about it. She explained what happened. And after that, I did a bit of an experiment. I started logging every time that I would wake up. And I told her to log the time. And they came out. When it happened, I was waking up and I was 700 miles away. So our brains are electrical chemical devices. We are basically a big radio transmitter. I've had a brain injury. I've been through EEGs. So, they put stuff on your head. They can measure what's going on inside the brain. So there is a form of we have resonance, like in music tones. If you set the right frequency, that frequency can interact with another item at the same frequency and cause it to vibrate. Knowledge could be very similar to that, where that gentleman might have been receiving that knowledge from some greater source.
Right, but is it local or non-local? So there are two questions.
It could be any place. It could be any place, because over distance you can still get a transmission.
No, but
if you're
let's say
tuned
we put
properly.
it like we put you in a bunker, right? That there is no frequency, no waves, electromagnetic waves go in and out. Would you still record the same time with your wife of going?
Probably not.
You don't. Oh, okay. Well, here it is.
Probably
Here's an
not.
experiment. See, we could have done that.
But here's the thing: is can you actually get to that level of bunker within the physics of our universe?
Well, I mean, but I would,
depending upon what level this is actually happening at, whether it's happening at like a radio frequency that our brain is, or is it something farther into the molecular level?
Well,
I don't know enough
claim
about.
It's just non-local. So those connections are non-local, because in the neural network, every neuron can be connected to any other neuron, and we just filter those connections because they are irrelevant for our survival.
Exactly.
But in principle, I can be right now connected to a stone on the Mars or any place else, because this locality is just an emergent approximate phenomenon. And if so, you and your wife also must have had those non-local connections. And people are claiming those connections all the time. There are stories when people, you're trying to call your friend and at the same time their phone rings. So the only problem we don't have experiments to claim, to check those things. And if we did, then that would be great. But here's even bigger the story. Not just connection between people, but it can be a connection to some other, super intelligence that people are claiming. And if that's true, that is something that needs to be investigated.
And one other quick thing about that, you were talking before about another intelligence. Could it be outside an incompatible intelligence? And since math, you were claiming about with the mathematics of it, since isn't mathematics more an expression of the physics of the universe?
Well, so, mathematics is our language of modeling.
Or the physics of the universe.
For whatever, including the physics. This is the language.
But I mean, generally in what we're talking about, it's, so if you have a certain physical nature of the entire universe, and if the intelligence is part of that physical embodiment, would we not be able to at some point understand it? Well, I don't see it as ever being incompatible as long as we had the ability to get to a high enough level.
I think
that would be the only incompatibility.
We may have a constraint on the memory, like Victor said. We may have a constraint on the processing power yet, but once we put all our resources together, we should be able to get it. Now, but again, I mean, those people usually don't like to speak up, and because they feel like if they're going to say that they've had contact with the super intelligence, people will call them crazy. They don't speak up, and so we cannot really perform experiments on them or rather with them, right? So that's
I think that could be part of the answer. Just quickly, I want to say that our brains are these systems that have evolved through the evolutionary process, and they have an architecture, if you're right, that is similar to the neural architecture or the neural network-like architecture of the universe. So to me, I imagine it could be this non-local thing, but along the lines of what Victor was saying, it could be our subconscious is doing a lot of computation that we're not aware of all the time. Someone mentioned dreams. I lost power for a minute, so I missed some of it, but I have a neuroscientist friend working in this area, and you can play music for a person during their sleep. They have to be in a certain, like, I forget if it's like alpha or gamma frequency brain state, but they learn in their sleep because the filter's not completely gone. Like there's still some attention at some lower level for information. So I think that we do model these agents and that they could even be doing intelligent computing, maybe even more intelligent than our conscious mind. Our conscious mind is just one high-level control system that is actually monitoring all the lower level computation that's going on all the time that's been built up through our evolutionary history. But maybe there are these dynamics to the brain that these formulas that the mathematician was seeing that he thought it was coming to him from some god or some super intelligence is actually just subconscious computation figuring things out because there's a lot more computational power to the subconscious mind than we're aware of.
Or during the daytime, you can be connected to one channels of communication that are useful for you during the daytime. And during the nighttime, you're connected to other channels of communication. And then that allows you to use the resources, non-local resources, not just your own resources, right? And that what makes this process is, and again, this is
so if particles become entangled by physically interacting, then how come social interaction, when I'm interacting with you right now, even though it's at a distance, you're hearing my ideas, that's having some sort of neural effect. Is it out of the question to think that that causal connection establishes some sort of entanglement between our cognitive systems such that
that's the whole
they're
point.
aligned? And then we may have phase transitions in the future at the same time because our brains are arriving at similar conclusions.
Right, but the question is whether it's, if it's entanglement, I would say not a quantum entanglement. But if it's a connection of neurons because we have met now and we kind of maybe share a source, and it would be stupid to store the same information twice in your head and my head. So probably it's much more convenient for the universe to store the same information in the same shared resources, and then both of us having access to it. Okay, so it makes a lot more sense from the survival point of view.
Where would the substrate be?
Yeah, so, but then it makes all sense that we are all connected to some this universal consciousness, some more, some less. And then, at some time you can enhance those connections and use them. Others you suppress it. because, maybe you're afraid of those connections, you suppress them, or maybe they're not useful for everyday work that you do, you suppress them, but they're there. And they're just the filter that you decide to put or not to put. It's up to you. Katya, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you just almost sound what I wanted to add to this concept of brain as a kind of radio signal receiver. Bernardo Kastrup says that it's vice versa. Brain is this is also a metaphor. It's a bit more complicated, but let's say it is a device for filtering information. So actually, filtering creates our disconnection, and so when filtering goes down, then you can get more information from, let's say, universal consciousness.
No, the one thing you don't want to do is to remove filter completely, because then the world will be incoherent and it will be just, you will go nuts. But putting filters is a healthy thing to do. The other thing is filter is not written in stone, and you should be able to change it. You should be able to say, well, this is relevant now, maybe relevant later, and other way around. And so doing this is healthy. The one thing I don't know, and we are trying to explore now, how much of control over this we have. That seems to be there. All those experiments with Donald in the bunker not being able to write the time in exactly the right moment is an experiment that can be done. Okay, if we had people who said, okay, I'm having this experiment now, or we'll say, okay, come to our lab, we'll put you in the bunker, and now show me all your magic tricks now. Okay, if it would be, people would be willing to do that, I think we can make lots of progress.
We can do that.
But I do think there is a psychological problem. People are afraid of coming out because, usual reaction to make fun of you, right? You are crazy.
I think that.
But in neural network theory, it's all make complete sense. It's your filter. It's up to you to decide what to filter, what not to filter, and when. Okay. So.
Is that part of?
It's not a question of being of healthy or unhealthy. It's just yes. Because of this filtering, we can live the experience of a separate being. That's.
I think filters we put just because our internal capacity is limited. It's like you are trying to make sense of information, and let's say information is a lot more than what you internally have. Then you will have to rewrite it every split second. This wouldn't be so. There's no other options for you. You have to decide what is it you're going to filter and what is it not going to filter. Now, the reason why we all seem to put very similar filters is because of this next level of learning. If we didn't, we wouldn't be able to work as a social system, like as in a biosphere. But that was our choice to do that, so that we can all function together and communicate and exchange ideas. But technically, we can change them. We should be able to change them.
Is that partially? Like, I just had a thought about that, about what you said before about people who have these experiences are considered crazy. Right. Is that maybe a zone for psychiatry? Because a lot of what my roommate, who is a psych nurse, tells me about how different things like schizophrenia present. These people hear voices, they have different things, different personalities, stuff like that happen to them. Is that them just unable to filter correctly?
What do you mean correctly? Maybe they're just happy
filtering
with
in a way that doesn't work in our level of society and cult, like you just explained, our cultural dynamic that lets us learn as a group and interact.
But they may be very happy with their filtering, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And so we should not call them crazy right away and say, okay, given your filters and given that you have non-vanishing connections with us as well, let's use it.
Right.
Let's use you. You are like, you can broadcast to us important information, formulas, ideas. Okay, let's make use of it instead of just giving you drugs so that you stop having any.
Exactly.
Speaking of drugs, psychedelics do the same thing. They temporarily dissolve those filters, And it can be enlightening because the filters are also biases. And not everybody updates their model all the time when new information comes in. So for example, let's say you're a creationist. And I think religion is great. This isn't attacking religion, but if you're a creationist who believes that the universe or the world is, the earth is 5,000 years old, you're denying, well-established science. I don't want to get into that territory, but my point is you can have filters. You're saying filters are adaptive, and they are, but you can also have maladaptive filters that some sort of therapy or pharmacological intervention can be useful for temporarily breaking those down to show you, for example, the interconnected nature of reality. It can actually be very spiritual. So I think it's good, but if you were stuck in a psychedelic state for 2 months, people would call you crazy. So I think it just all depends on the position in life that you're in, the task that you have to accomplish, whether you call it crazy or not, and how long you're in it, because you're in this new state and things can get very confusing, but they can also be enlightening. The thing is you have to come out of it and then reflect on what was the difference between your normal state where you see society and reality as it is, and then compare what you learned when the filters were taken away, but then maybe try to get some understanding of what was a real insight and what might have been a hallucination.
Okay, so Alexander, I'll give you a word in a second. Let me just finish it, because if we able to now translate the information that the person in that state received to the language that we understand, then it would be a benefit to everyone. So let's say the person had communicated, he understood something, but he just doesn't know the right mathematics to explain it, or cannot put it in the right language that we can understand. Then it was a connection. It was maybe fun for him, but not useful for the society, for the biosphere. Now, if we can come up to this person and say, well, let's learn some mathematics, maybe if that was a mathematical connection that brought some formulas. Let's translate it to the language that we can all understand. Then we can all benefit from such connections, and then we should not be suppressing them. We should actually promoting such connections. But for that, we need to kind of have a more interactions and more experimenting with such cases, I think. Alexander, go ahead.
And what if this person speaks in very, very different math, for example? If we have a math,
that we discussed. Kind of
numbers,
mathematics, it's universal, right? We just need to translate it.
Yeah, but maybe we haven't discovered it yet, because if person speaks in complex numbers and we don't know what complex number is, it would be nonsense, right, for us?
No, we would try to learn it.
Could be.
I think we can still try to distinguish some random noise and nonsense from. Okay. Okay. I mean, maybe not. Maybe you're right. Maybe Einstein trying to explain to ancient Greeks that this curved, they wouldn't be able to understand it.
He would be crazy. Yeah.
Like he would be considered crazy.
Like crazy.
Maybe we are considered crazy right now. But unless we try, we wouldn't know, right? And actually having recorded. Okay, let's just put it. Having recorded all the information that such cases received and stored in some database where we can later access, read, and try to reinterpret, that would be useful. So it would be useful also for ancient Greeks. So, let's say Einstein taught them about relativity theory, then later Newton discovered it, and maybe, with the help of Gauss, he would be able to figure out.
In the future could be. I mean, people with psychedelic or some other experiences tell that they feel it's true, but it's not explainable in our language, right?
And we are trying to make it explainable. So we're saying feeling is not good enough. So let's just try to put down formulas.
Okay, I've got a question about computation. How would you define computation? Because in math, if we have a formal theory, we have a number of axioms, an inference rule, and we have the whole infinite variety of theorems, right? And computation is inference, right? From some axioms to a theorem. That's what computation is, no? in math. But in physical world, every computation consumes resources, right? So you cannot have the whole variety of all the theorems if you have a set of axioms. Although in math, it's possible.
I mean, in physics, you don't have computation. You actually have only a dynamical system.
Okay, but okay, in terms of neural network, training is a computation, right?
And neural
modeling
network
is
is a special
computation.
kind of
Mhm.
dynamical system. It's a
Okay.
special kind that just has predefined dynamical rules for this trainable and non-trainable variables. So the fact that it is able to compute stuff is a byproduct. It's an emergent phenomenon. The fundamental phenomena is that just the dynamics, the activation dynamics of neurons and the learning dynamics of weights and biases. Everything else is, and our biological networks actually are not very good in computing. Try to multiply large numbers. You're not going to be actually good at that. So neural networks are not designed for that. Yes, as an emergent phenomenon, you are able to compute things, but that's not how neural networks are designed. So, Katya,
I'm just trying to get the difference between inference and math that happens like instantaneously, right? Because you always have a theorem out of axioms, right? Without any resources in theory. But in reality, you have to spend a lot of resources and money now to train the network to receive some
because it's mathematics. No, I mean computational theory is just a branch of mathematics, right? So and the mathematical rules apply there. For this neural network theory, it's a very small branch of mathematics, which is dynamical systems. Small and yet rich, and that's what to define a neural network, you need very few equations to understand what the neural network will produce. Very hard. So it's like one of those examples of a very simple rule that gives complex emergent phenomenon, just like cellular automata, right? But it's a different mechanical system. But that's kind of the essence of it. Katya, you're raising your hand, and I have a feeling that we are not going to be able to go to psychology or cosmology today. Yet we'll have a lot of fun with intelligence. Katya, go ahead.
I'm trying to understand what you want to, or what you're supposed to get with from these experiments with people having some experiences. First, I think they are talking about some higher intellect or some higher knowledge, but in some cases, I think it doesn't mean that they get some information. Like with Ramanujan, it's his Devi gave him some formulas.
Yes.
This is a more obvious case, but in many cases, I think people just feel something.
Yeah.
And
so when
they feel just like the filtering goes down, and they are able to feel themselves more connected. So they having some experiences. Let's say it's not a very good word, but okay, let's say emotional. So it doesn't mean that they get some information that can be somehow proved, but do you mean to model the experience itself somehow, or what do you mean by?
So modeling the experience itself would be great. I think it's in a distant future. There are more basic phenomena we haven't modeled yet. However, I'm taking it as an experimental fact, not a fact, a possibility, a hypothesis, that they are having some non-local connections. Okay, something that is not going to be describable within the finite neural network and of themselves. This is a hypothesis. I don't know if it's true. And then I'm saying, given this hypothesis, let's try to prove it. Okay, now to prove it, if they say they had some special connection to superintelligence, that tells me nothing. It's just how they call things. It is how they interpret what happened to them using the language that they know. Okay, maybe if they knew, I don't know, general relativity, they would have told me about they followed the geodesic equation with such and such metric. But they don't know that mathematics, and that's why they use it, tell me using the words that they know. So my proposal would be, let's try to identify what is it that they don't know. Let's give them the language, let's say language of neural networks. And maybe after you learn the mathematics of this language, you will be able to retell me what you just told me before using more precise terms and more precise structures. Now, if they're able to do that, we may be able to understand their experience better and learn how we can actually prove it or disprove it. Now, if they just keep telling us that they had some connection with the superintelligence and they don't know how to explain it, that's not very useful for us. Okay, because who knows if they're telling the truth, they are lying. Probably they're not lying, but it's still not very useful because we do not have yet the tools to put it into the model. And I want those tools to be in place. And for that, we need to see two things. Can we somehow show that the connections are non-local? And can we somehow show that there is new information that goes in? So information and non-locality. As you said, with formulas, it's easy. Without formulas, it's hard. So we have to think what kind of experiment can be set up. With non-local connections, like with the Donald and his wife's experience, we can just try to shield any other signals and seeing whether it's possible for them still communicate. That would be a great experience because many people had this non-local connections with their relatives, and the thing I don't know whether Donald himself can trigger such connections or it happens without his control. So probably it just happened at some point in his life, right, Donald?
Yeah, it was totally beyond my control, and it was not two-way. She did not experience anything similar. It was me basically picking up on what was happening to her.
Yeah, it was one connection going one direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it all makes sense. So basically, you removed the filter, she didn't. Okay, so you could have sensed some of the state in her behavior, and she couldn't sense. So it's one directional connection, but still, I mean,
Right.
it all makes sense. Let's confirm that there is a connection that was established. So yeah, non-locality, one thing to check. And then what kind of information? And we cannot establish the second part without people willing to learn some mathematics or whatever, because mathematics is the language with which they should be able to describe things.
I've heard a lot of people, because I'm always interested in this, especially talking to people who aren't really people who believe in anything supernatural, like otherwise rational people. I say, has anything paranormal happened in your life or any sort of experience like that? And a lot have told me that it's been a story where someone has died that is somewhere else, and they received some sort of message or something to call that person and found out. And it's been amazing because it's not people who normally have that, and they're not like trying to say, oh, there's this and this. They're just telling me an experience oftentimes that they haven't shared with other people. And yeah, that makes you wonder.
Like, for example, let me just add to this. Having a database of those experiences coded in some language that we all understand, like neural network language, just a database, and then have some large language model learn all this, and maybe finding some correlations. All this would be great if that.
What about this as an experiment? So there was this comment on the neural network, the Facebook page, and you responded to it. So I think some of you have seen that. What if we did an experiment? I think we could easily raise like a few $1,000s with like a Kickstarter or something to fund this, but basically just have people who have their identities verified on social media to share those experiences. And then we look for correlations between the kind of experiences, and we also look for things that metaphorically are analogous to things that would be explained by the neural network theory.
We should, but again, we should convince those people to use the language, not that they want to use. Right, I had such and such experience, and I think it was, but put like limit.
Okay, would it be worse though if, like, for example, if I was tasked with going through it and translating? I know there's some bias.
Oh, and yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Yeah,
because I already see the parallels. I haven't got a chance to respond to that person, but I want to be like, I had a similar experience, except when I had that experience, I had an awareness of the frameworks that you're talking about.
Right,
I saw it in the way you're talking, because I did have similar.
Exactly.
More subtle versions.
If we can do that, that would be very useful. And then we can actually take those people and, like, do the experiments. Well, if they're okay with that, of course, we are not doing experiments and doing the measurements and seeing whether we can prove two things again. Information, non-local information, and then non-local communication channel. Some new information and non-local communication channel. Alexander, go ahead.
Yeah, question. So Donald Hoffman said that it is possible, he has a theory, that the whole space-time is a construct of our consciousness, evolutional construct of our consciousness, right? You know, for the sake of survival. That maybe the world around is not like that. There is no space or time. It's completely different. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, but then it's just you. Then it's just you, and then it's
No, not necessarily. It can be a field of consciousness, or it can be us all, but it's completely different world. But we perceive it as having space and time.
Yeah. So my view is usually I'm a physicist, so I want a model. I don't care how you interpret it. If we can write down equations and make predictions, then I'm in business. It doesn't matter whether this world is real or I'm hallucinating it. If I write some equations and I can make prediction what will happen next split second, I'm okay with it. I mean, I'm not, I will say this is the mathematics that describes it. Completely phenomenological approach. Now, I'm sensing now that this theory of standard model that we have for physics just isn't complete because it doesn't have something that we have been just discussing right now. Now, I had the deja vu experience many times. Okay, has no explanation of the explanation within the framework of regular physics. It just doesn't have it now. But it is experience that we have kind of inside ourselves, and so it's cannot be like independently. Or let's all have that experience. Let's sit down and look at it. So that's the problem. That's the problem with the modeling. Yet, if we get enough people who have this experience and we can put all those experiences within a unifying framework, then I think we can prove it beyond reasonable doubts and whatever.
But can you somehow describe your experience of deja vu in?
Oh, that happened with me all the time. So something happens, and it's like for some it's blurry, but for me, I know exactly that I saw that. A week ago, or last night, or 2 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, what about formulating it in formulas?
No. Right now I have this knowledge of it, and I do not know how to put it within the framework of neural networks. So this is an example where I have a phenomena, and I do not know how to describe it. So that bugs me, of course, because it is something that is. It's why I can tell you, because in neural networks, there is actually computational time. Like there is a time that flows forward in time. Like it always goes forward in time. And somehow what must have happened is there must have been non-local in time connection that have sparked it. Now, of course, people may say, well, maybe during the dream, you just reconstructed all possible future scenarios and you just happened to realize one of them, and then that's what you've experienced the next day. I don't buy it, because there is so much entropy in the possibilities. I could have not, just like you can do these calculations and see, I could have not calculated all possible future outcomes of the next day. And so there must have been some weird effect here, some kind of non-local temporal connection. So, yeah, when I usually say non-locality, I mean spatial non-locality, right? One neuron here is connected to one neuron there. And that makes total sense with respect to the neural network theory. Here, we're talking about temporal non-locality. Okay, so somehow the neuron here knew about what was happening there. That is not clicking well with a model. So yeah, so that I don't know. And it's okay to have phenomena that you cannot explain, but not having any, that is bad. And I think there is a lot of phenomena that we just haven't put together, like a database of weird psychological phenomena. That would be nice if we had it. Other thoughts, ideas?
A question. Okay. If we make an experiment and give like an LSD stamp to 100 people, right?
LSD.
LSD, yes.
Okay.
And they will experience.
Somebody had to say
right?
that. Somebody had to propose.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that they are going to ban this video on YouTube. You have to say it. Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, and ask them after a while what they experience. So they will share some experiences, right?
Well,
but you cannot
make this
measure it or verify it or do it. But obviously they experience something and they tell in it. Will it count as an experiment from your perspective?
It would. But our hope is to make experiments with fewer and fewer parameters. So usually the problem, like in any biological experiment, what's the problem? Too many parameters. than
Mhm.
psychological, even more parameters. So
Yeah.
we want to reduce it to like some bare minimum.
To have statistical significance.
Yeah, so that it becomes more statistically significant.
You could put them in fMRI machines too. Now you can scan people. They've shown you can reconstruct imagery, and AI is like doing it like way better than the technology before, like new AI systems. But with that, we could give them LSD, and then we could scan them during the experience and construct their sort of quality of space. So a lot of people have a similar report of seeing these like machine elves or something. There's been like articles about like people seeing these same entities very commonly after doing psychedelics. So it's a quantitative experiment as long as you're taking like, you know, if you're doing the study, even though it's all in their head and not observable. I mean, a lot of psychology, neuroscience, psychology studies ask you to report pain. There's no way to confirm a subjective measure of pain. So it wouldn't be that much different, but you could actually also use scanning techniques to maybe get an objective understanding of the visual percepts that these are having.
There's no problem with subjectivity, Bobby. There's no problem with subjectivity. There has to be correlations. Okay. Now, but the problem is the correlations should be between them. So the one reports the same effect as the other, not because both of them saw something before. So like if both of them were, so like, let me give you an example with this two people.
People from different cultures maybe too.
You know, somebody proposed me this experiment, which I thought first was great, of going to the company, a mobile company, and trying to record calls. And they can see like if the two relatives simultaneously try to dial each other. And then if there are correlations, we can like, you know, put it in the statistics and say, well, yes, there seems to be some connections. And when one relative tried to call the other, the very same moment, the other relative tried to call the. Now, what's the problem with this experiment? Is that they might be calling to each other just because they happen to heard the same event. So both of them saw that. Yeah, go ahead, but we wanted to say something. No?
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay, because then we're not proving the point. Then we're just showing that yes, they're interested in the same events. They saw some news, in their favorite team won, some game, and they decided to call each other to exchange this knowledge. That's what we want to prove.
Yeah. I've been really into this. I've been talking about this on some podcasts too. So basically, that phenomenon of imagining someone is thinking of someone and then they call, I think it happens a lot. Here's what's fascinating. It sort of is mind reading. I think we can explain it and kind of explain away the normal explanation that skeptics use. So the normal explanation entails explaining it with frequency bias. So they say, oh, you were just thinking about that person all the time. And then they called and you thought you were thinking of them, but actually subconsciously you were thinking of them like 50 times throughout the day. I'm arguing that that's not a good explanation necessarily, or the right explanation. So there's two possibilities that I've thought of that could explain this psychic connection where it's not something supernatural, but it's not the normal skeptic explanation. One of them involves exactly what you said. You could have a situation like this where, for example, your mom calls you, let's say, on Sundays and Wednesdays, but there's no plan to coordinate that. And you haven't even consciously thought about that. It's simply that she gets off work early on Wednesdays and then Sunday's her other day. And you're used to getting this call from her on Wednesday and Thursday. You don't even realize because there's some variability. It's not always Wednesday. But then let's say you have a week and she didn't call on the first day of the week that she sometimes calls on Wednesday, and then Sunday comes around. What's going on is that your brain is making a prediction. So this is kind of based on Friston's active inference framework. There's a pattern that you encoded. It's in the subconscious mind. You know that she often calls, but you don't know it consciously. So your brain's primed to think of her. You think of her and then she calls. It's not this frequency bias explanation where you're thinking her all the time. You actually predicted she was going to call on a subconscious level. So it's going to be like you were reading that person's mind, but it's just because you have an internal model that has that pattern stored. The other situation is, for example, let's say you and I met 20 years ago and we had a discussion maybe about some show, like maybe we love Twin Peaks. And And then 20 years later, they decided to bring back Twin Peaks. And we're seeing commercials for Twin Peaks coming out again. And I can't even consciously remember that when I met you, we bonded over a Twin Peaks discussion. Maybe we were drunk at a party and we didn't remember. But I think of you and I call you and you were like, wow, I was just thinking of you. You don't realize that there's a common variable priming you both.
Exactly.
And that's why that experiment would be flawed.
That was my point. That was my point. So you cannot really rely on the data from the cell phone counters because there are so many parameters in the external world with which you can be correlated. Your actions would be correlated with whatever happened with both of us. And so that's why
and there's a lot of subconscious processing that our brains are making predictions that we're not aware of. So it feels conscious, but there's actually some knowledge there that's making you predict something.
And I call this knowledge is the parameters. It's like variables that are shared in your model and in my model. We just have the same random variables, right, shared. So anyway, so this wouldn't work. But thinking about this type of experiments where we can reduce, like maybe people completely don't know each other. We know for sure, and then we all give them LSD or whatever we decided to give them because we are evil. And then they all wake up and then they tell us same or similar. I know we ask them to name a color, white or black, and they all, most of them say black because that's what they show. Most of them say white. So something like this, with this very small amount of information that they can share. With that, we can do statistics. But if there's a lot of information, if they tell us a lot of words, describe their experience, then it's hard to build statistics out of that. And that would be a problem. So yeah, I don't know really of what should be the right experiment, but since such things do happen, we should investigate that further. This is the first time when we just drove away, right? We started with intelligence and then went our orthogonal direction. I don't think we're going to have time to cover the two other topics, which is okay. We'll have other meetings. But any final remarks about intelligence or the psychological experiments that we will do? Anything at all? Everybody's tired. I'm tired too. It's Friday night. Next time we should bring alcohol to these meetings, right?
I can't. I'm at work, but
you cannot. You can watch us
my lunch
drink,
hour.
So I might make an experiment with that.
Yeah, we can make an
There you
experiment. Okay, how about next time everybody brings their favorite beverage, and if all of a sudden we all show up with a Budweiser, we'll say, "Oh, that cannot."
There you go.
And LSD, if it is legal in your place, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay,
I'll be the
guys,
designated driver then.
Yes. Was a lot of fun. We'll continue the discussion next time, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.